My name is Brad Howard, and I'm doing my presentation today on the Storm Prediction Center, and just explaining exactly what they do and what are some of the terms that they do mean. The Storm Prediction Center, also known as the SPC, is located in Norman, Oklahoma. It is tasked with forecasting the risk of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes in the United States. The agency issues convective outlooks, mesoscale discussions, and watches as part of this process. And we will look further into what each of these mean. The process is a three-stage process in which the area, time period, and details of a severe weather forecast are refined from a broad-scale forecast of potential hazards to a more specific and detailed forecast of what hazards are expected, where they are expected to occur, and in what time frame. The Storm Prediction Center is responsible for forecasting the risk of severe weather caused by severe thunderstorms, specifically those producing tornadoes, hail 1 inch or larger, and winds 58 miles per hour or greater. All of this is necessary to help prepare us for being able to take cover when a potentially hazardous storm is coming. The SPC also forecasts hazardous winter and fire weather, which fire weather is conditions favorable for a wildfire. What do they do? The Storm Prediction Center employs a total of 43 personnel, including 5 lead forecasters, 10 mesoscale outlook forecasters, and 7 assistant mesoscale forecasters. Many of these forecasters are also involved in more things than just putting out the outlooks. Many SPC forecasters and support staff are heavily involved in scientific research into severe and hazardous weather. This involves conducting applied research and writing technical papers, developing training materials, giving seminars and other presentations locally and nationwide, attending scientific conferences, and participating in weather experiments. Now we're going to look into a little bit of history of the Storm Prediction Center and where they began. The Storm Prediction Center began as the Severe Local Storms Unit, also known as SAILS, in 1952. This was a special unit of forecasters in the Weather Bureau. And below you can see a picture of some of the first forecasters that worked there. The picture is dated April of 1956. At the time it began, it was located in Washington, D.C., and then it later moved to Kansas City in 1954. In 1955, SAILS began issuing convective outlooks. Convective outlooks we will go more into later in the presentation to learn exactly what they are. In 1960, SAILS began issuing radar summaries every 3 hours. In 1966, SAILS became known as the National Severe Storms Forecast Center, NSSFC, due to the increased duty of radar summaries. In 1968, the NSSFC began issuing status reports on watches. In 1971, the NSSFC made the first computerized data transmission. In 1982, they issued the first particularly dangerous situation. In 1986, they the Day 2 convective outlook and the mesoscale discussion were introduced. In 1995, they moved from Kansas City to Norman, Oklahoma, and then that is when it became known as the Storm Prediction Center. In 1998, the Storm Prediction Center began issuing national fire weather outlooks also. In 2000, the SPC first issued the Day 3 convective outlook on an experimental basis, and it was made official in 2001. From 1995 to 2006, the SPC was located at the University of Oklahoma Westheimer Airport in the same building as the National Severe Storms Laboratory. After this, the SPC moved to the National Weather Center, where it continues operations today. Below is a picture of the building itself where they are stationed. What do they mean, convective outlooks? The next few slides are going to kind of describe what exactly convective outlook is and the meanings of the different risk factors. The Storm Prediction Center issues convective outlooks, AC, consisting of categorical and probability forecasts describing the general threat of severe convective storms over the contiguous United States for the next 6 to 192 hours, which is also Day 1 all the way up through Day 8. They are labeled and issued by day and are issued up to five times a day. They are issued in Zulu time, also known as UTC. There are different categories of risk to go along with the convective outlooks that each have a different meaning of how prominent storms are in a certain area at a certain time, which we will look at next. TSTM is indicated by light green on a convective outlook map. This risk indicates that there is a risk for a general thunderstorm. MRGL, also short for marginal, is indicated by a darker green on a convective outlook map. This indicates a very low but present risk of severe weather. A marginal risk day indicates storms of only limited organization, longevity, coverage, and/or intensity. This category replaced the See Text category on October 22nd of 2014. The next risk is SLGT, short for slight, is indicated by yellow on a convective outlook map. It represents a slight risk for severe weather. A slight risk day typically will mean the threat exists for scattered severe weather, including scattered wind damage or severe hail, and possibly some isolated tornadoes. During the peak severe weather season, most days will have a slight risk somewhere in the United States. Isolated significant severe events are possible in some circumstances, but are generally not widespread. And I will give an example of a map later in the presentation, but for the most part throughout the United States on a daily basis you will see a lot of area of anywhere from marginal up to slight, and typically very little of the higher risk situations. The next one is ENH, or also short for enhanced. It is represented by orange on the convective outlook map. This means there is an enhanced risk of severe weather. An enhanced risk day indicates that there is a greater risk for severe weather than that which would be indicated by a slight risk, but a lower risk than moderate. Severe storms are expected to be more concentrated and of varying intensities. This risk category replaced the upper end of slight on October 22nd, 2014. The next risk is MDT, which is short for moderate, and it is indicated by red on the convective outlook map. This indicates a moderate risk for severe weather. A moderate risk day indicates that more widespread and or more dangerous severe weather is possible, sometimes with major hurricanes, with significant severe weather often more likely. Numerous tornadoes, including some strong tornadoes, more widespread or severe wind damage, and very large destructive hail could occur. Major events such as large tornado outbreaks are sometimes also possible on moderate risk days, but with greater uncertainty. Moderate risk days are not uncommon and typically occur several times a month, especially during peak season. A slight risk area typically surrounds a moderate risk area where the threat is lower. High is indicated by pink on a convective outlook map. It indicates a high risk for severe weather. A high risk day indicates a considerable likelihood of a major tornado outbreak or much less often an extreme derecho event. On these days, the potential exists for extremely severe and life-threatening weather, including widespread strong or violent tornadoes and or very destructive straight-line winds. Hail alone cannot verify or produce a high risk on its own, although such a day usually involves a threat for widespread, very large hail as well. Many of the most prolific severe weather days were high-risk days. Such days are quite rare. A high risk is typically issued only a few times each year. High-risk areas are usually surrounded by a larger moderate risk area which uncertainty is greater or the threat is somewhat lower. Day 1 convective outlooks are issued 5 times per day. Day 1 outlooks also provide a textual forecast, map of categories and probabilities, and chart of probabilities. The Day 1 is currently the only outlook to issue probabilities specifically for tornadoes, hail, or wind. It is the most descriptive and highest accuracy outlook. So here's an example of a Day 1 convective outlook map. As you can see, the whole eastern side of the United States has a risk of some sort, most of it being marginal. And as you can see toward the southeast, there is a shaded pink area which is a high risk area, and it is surrounded by a larger moderate area which is then surrounded by a higher enhanced area. Out west, there's really no risk for a thunderstorm on this particular day. Day 2 convective outlooks are issued twice daily and refer to tomorrow's weather. Day 2 outlooks include only a categorical outline, textual description, and a probability graph for severe convective storms. Generally, Day 2 moderate risk are fairly uncommon. And here's a map of a Day 2 convective outlook. And as you can see, there is no high risk. It's mostly marginal or lesser risk. Day 3 outlooks refer to the day after tomorrow and include the same products as the Day 2 outlook. Higher probability forecasts are less and less likely as the forecast period increases due to lessening forecast ability farther in advance. Day 3 moderate risk are quite rare. Day 4 to 8 outlooks are the longest term official SPC forecast product and often change significantly from day to day. Now we're going to talk about mesoscale discussions. The Storm Prediction Center's mesoscale discussions cover mesoscale convective discussions. They typically precede a tornado or severe thunderstorm watch by 1 to 3 hours. Mesoscale discussions are designed to give local forecasters an update on a region where a severe weather threat is emerging and an indication of whether a watch is likely. Here's an example of a mesoscale discussion. It reminds me of something you would hear on the radio where they're saying a watch is likely, giving specific forecast for a period or area. What do they mean, weather watches? A lot of people get watches and warnings confused, so this is going to explain what each means. Weather watches are issued by the Storm Prediction Center preceding arrival of severe weather by 1 to 6 hours. Watches are generally less than 20,000 to 25,000 square miles in area and are preceded by a mesoscale discussion. So typically you see a watch being given for a specific county or counties. Watches indicate that conditions are favorable for severe thunderstorms or tornadoes. When a tornado watch is issued, that means that conditions are thought favorable for a severe thunderstorm producing tornadoes. A severe thunderstorm watch means that there are organized severe thunderstorms, but conditions are not expected to create tornadoes. A weather warning indicates that there's an immediate severe weather threat to life and property. They are normally the next step after a watch. Warnings are not issued by the Storm Prediction Center as they are issued by local National Weather Service offices. Fire weather outlooks is one of the other things that the SPC issues. Fire weather outlooks are used to determine the risk of wildfires in certain areas. The outlooks issued are for day 1, day 2, and days 3 through 8, just like the weather outlooks. There are 4 types of fire weather outlook areas. There's CTEXT, a critical fire weather area for wind and relative humidity, an extremely critical fire weather area for extreme conditions of wind and relative humidity, and a critical fire weather area for dry thunderstorms. I hope this presentation has helped everyone understand what the Storm Prediction Center does and what some of the terms that we all see on TV mean.